Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me. So guys, as normal, mainstream media is catching up with this channel, and things we were saying weeks ago are happening now, and people are talking about them now. So I'm going to tell you what's going to be happening in the future and why that is going to be happening. So we're going to be talking about the Royal Marines exercise in London and why that's important. Belarus are starting to threaten people now with nuclear weapons. Argentina they're arming themselves for another potential conflict in the Folklands. We've got all sorts of stuff happening all around the world, guys. So let's just get into it. So this in mainstream media today and this morning, it's something that I wasn't aware of, that the Royal Marines are doing an exercise in London called Exercise Felix Assault. Now, let me just quickly explain something when it comes to training and military training. If you're in the military, before you go on a deployment, before you do something, you'll do something called pre-deployment training. And guys, do you know what? It's not a trick question. It's not a trick. It is training you do before you deploy. Now, how you get to that stage in the military, first of all, it'll become apparent why I'm explaining this. First of all, you do whatever your role training is. So if you're an infantier, if you're a medic, if you're a signals guy, whatever your job is in the military, you will do that to the highest standard that you can. And then you look at what you're potentially going to be doing and any task-specific roles. So, for example, and I'm just making this up, if a unit is going to go to Afghanistan, then that unit those men in that infantry unit will not be taught emergency childbirth, for example, because they're not going to need that knowledge. They will be taught the wounding patterns and the injury patterns that are in that location and other things around that environment they're operating in. So why do I mention this? Because of this exercise Felix Assault. What we can kind of look at these training exercises as now is pre-war training. So these are mainland UK training exercises where the Royal Marines have partnered up with the EOD, so the Explosive Ordnance Disposal Unit or whatever. Now, the key locations they've practiced, as they say on the news, they say they're storming these locations. They're not. They're going in there and providing security while the EOD teams search for devices. But what is key is the locations that they're training on. So remember what I previously said about pre-deployment training, that we can say pre-conflict training now? You know, the government must have looked at underground stations and identified those as a potential threat. They must have also looked at these tourist locations and identified those as a potential threat. Why? Well, if you're a hostile enemy nation and you want to inflict as much trauma on a nation, you would go with these big locations, these headline locations. So think about the London Underground. Think about if there was an incident there, how many secondary places would be affected by that. If the London Underground was, for example, closed down, you'd have people stuck everywhere. They wouldn't be able to travel. It'd take time for that. It'd take time for the people who were stuck to realise that they were stuck and find alternate places. Then all those alternate means of travel would dry up. Equally with these tourist attractions. Think about the big names, Royal Albert Hall, you've got the National Museum or something. These are the big places that everybody knows, everybody's been. So if there is an incident on those places, it gets a lot more media, coverage, and that's why enemy nations seem to target these locations. One thing I will say though, additionally to this, is a target that I don't think I'm sure they understand it, but Doncaster, if you live in the North Midlands of England, Doncaster Railway, as I understand, it's like a hub for all the railway lines. So I think this was designed in the Second World War. So basically, in the north, all the railway lines go through Doncaster. I think that could also be a potential target. But guys, who knows? What do I know? So anyway, remember, if you've been watching this channel a while now, guys, you'll understand I keep talking about the Falklands, about Antarctica, about oil. And maybe 2 weeks ago, maybe even longer, in fact, definitely longer. Well, first of all, months and months and months ago, I said, right, guys, the Falkland Islands are going to be a key, they're going to be a key flashpoint in the future because of the control of the Falklands. And guys, if you've heard me say this, 1,000 times, I'm sorry, but people are new to the channel. Whoever controls the Falkland Islands controls Antarctica and the amounts of oil that's there. So it becomes a really, and this is why I identified it, it becomes a really high value, a very lucrative endeavour for somebody to take the Falklands. Now, I mentioned this so many, like months and months and months ago, and then I mentioned it when the Argentinians were buying the Dutch F-16s. I said, guys, look what I said months ago. The Argentinians are now buying Dutch fighter planes, F-16s. Why are they buying them? It's for the Falklands. I then said, like a couple of weeks ago, I said, look what else the Argentinians are buying. Amphibious warships. Why are they buying amphibious warships? I mean, they're going to have an amphibious war with Peru? I don't know. So all these things are coming to, are all happening. They're moving closer together. And each one of these little tactical tiptoes brings us closer to another conflict in the Falklands. And guys, Britain will have to defend the Falklands with everything. Let me just read you what what's come out now in mainstream media. Where are we? Recent moves by Argentina to renew and expand its military capabilities, including aspirations to acquire amphibious assault ships. So as I understand, these are ex-Italian ones. And a deal to buy retired F-16 fighter jets from Denmark have raised eyebrows. The Falklands War of 1982 remains a defining event of the histories of the United Kingdom and Argentina. So for those of you who don't know, 1982, the Argentinians invaded the Falklands, the Royal Marines surrendered, and the Parachute Regiment had to go and take those islands back. I continue. For Britain, the conflict reaffirmed its sovereignty over the islands and demonstrated its military resolve. Now guys, the military resolve was there because of the Antarctica, the military resolve was in the Falklands because of its claim to Antarctica. It showed that despite its decline, Britain remained a first-rank military power and a force for good. Well, you could argue whether it were a force for a good, depending on which side of that, whether you're Argentinian or not. The defeat was national trauma for Argentina. Yet it did not quench the desire to reclaim the Falkland Islands. Now guys, we could rephrase that. It did not quench the desire to reclaim Antarctica and the oil that is in there. This enduring desire is continually fueled by Argentina's political leaders, who use the Falkland Islands issue to unite the populace and divert the attention from domestic woes. So you see this time and time again all over the world, guys, right? When there's a problem internally with a country, the best thing for them to do is like, right, guys, our financial policies have failed, our social policies have failed, looks like we're going to get kicked out at this next election. Let's have a war! And you see this all over the world. Look in the West, look what's happening. So we've got some crazy stuff happening. I've said it for the longest time. I think Argentina's going to have another crack at the Falklands. More's coming out every day about this, guys. And also, you've got, I'll just read you the headline here, guys, and I'll put all these links in the description. So also, I'll just read you the headline and I'll talk about it. Russia could rip up decades-old treaty and claim oil-rich Antarctic land, experts warn. So I've been saying this for the longest time, guys, all right? With Russia, they're so big. If they were, like, look at Russia now. They can't really get much more condemnation for the stuff they're doing. So if Russia just took down some, and I don't even know how it works, some sort of oil drilling ship. I don't know how it works, guys. I'm sure some of you guys are experts. But as some oil drilling equipment and just started drilling in Antarctica, who would stop them? Would somebody say, you know, hey guys, you can't do that? And Russia would say, okay, no problem, we stop tomorrow. Right? Who, unless somebody's going to fly over that and blow it up, then how can anyone stop them? Remember, I've done lots of videos on the Russian dark fleet. So the dark fleet is oil tankers that cruise around full of oil. You know, they don't pay insurance, they don't service them. You know, they're not up to international maritime standards. And Russia already has the infrastructure, you know, to move this oil around. From the sanctions that we imposed on Russia, Russia have had to find alternate customers who don't care where the oil comes from, so Russia can sell this at a cheaper rate. So for Russia, they've got the market, they've got the customers, they've got the capacity, and they've got the ships basically to go and do this. You know, they can sell this oil to China, to the other BRICS nations, you know, whoever they want. Because guys, who can police them if they go and do that? You know, and it's going to be a key issue in the next 12 to 18 months, the relationships between Argentina and Russia. How are those two going to mold together? Are they going to find military support? Is Russia going to send, as it said it would, you know, weapons to the West's adversaries? So absolutely wild stuff happening at the moment down there in the South Atlantic. We've got 50 Ukrainian ground technicians that have now apparently qualified from Denmark. They're ground crew training in Denmark. What I will say about, so for those of you who don't know, the Ukrainians have been given a load of F-16 fighter planes. The fighter planes will then be used, hopefully, if you're Ukrainian, to push back the Russian aircraft that are sending the glide bombs. That will give the infantry time to move forwards, and then they can hopefully use those in conjunction with each other. But without ground crew, these aircraft are useless. So it's one of the things I've said for the longest time. Without ground crew, without servicing, without the proper maintenance schedules, these aircraft are just going to be on the floor, you know, doing nothing. So the Ukrainians have had 50 technicians qualified. What I will say to that is, it's okay having a qualified technician, but who's going to be in charge of them? You know, because you kind of need a senior technician to be overseeing everything. So it'd be really interesting to figure out how that's going to fit on the ground, how that's going to work, how the parts supply is going to happen, how the maintenance schedule is going to work, how bringing the aircraft in from Poland or wherever, how that's going to work, and what are the Russians going to do, you know? Like, if you're a Russian military general or whatever they have over there, you know, and you're seeing this happening, there's only so many runways that these aircraft can fly from in Ukraine. So it makes absolute sense, if you're a Russian, just to take these airfields out straight away. Why would you even bother waiting? You know, and then that leads me on to what I've always said. I don't think these aircraft will actually be flown from Ukraine. I think they'll be flown from outside Ukraine. Poland's my bet, because it becomes very difficult to identify what aircraft is what, especially if you take these transponders off. For example, the Ukrainians have said they're going to already keep some of their aircraft not in Ukraine to save them from you know, enemy attacks. Now, wouldn't it be great if Britain could do that in the Second World War with our Spitfires and Hurricanes? But anyway, you know, so the Ukrainians have said they're going to keep some aircraft out of the country. Now, how are the Ukrainians going to say, hey guys, this F-16 here, this is not going on an offensive mission, this is actually coming in for a repair, or this one's coming in to change out a broken F-16. So the whole airspace becomes murky and cloudy, as a better analogy, you know, and it's going to become very difficult to understand what's happening. And if any of these F-16s get shot down, as long as then they don't crash or eject over Russia, how are you going to know where they've been flown from? How are you going to know who the pilots are? And again, I think that they'll use NATO trained pilots, US Air Force veterans or whatever, you know, and then they'll be part of the Ukrainian International Legion. But anyway, guys, some wild stuff happening, and you've always got to, when you see these things, change your perspective and think, right, how are the Russians going to take this, and how are the Russians going to escalate? Because this boils down, and it's going to boil down, and at the end of the day, you're going to have, you know, as all conflicts do, they're going to be conflicts of manufacturing. So let me get this one up now, guys. I think I've got a read here. Okay, so Belarus now are threatening the use of nuclear weapons, and you couldn't make this up. So remember when the Russians started to train the Belarusians up on how to use tactical nuclear weapons, and they were doing nuclear exercises. Well, it comes out that the chief of the general staff has actually said now that they will use tactical nuclear weapons if Belarus's independence and sovereignty is threatened. Now, the two key phrases or two key words, I guess, to take away from that are the tactical side of these systems and threatened. So I've said for the longest time, I don't think the big ones are going to be used, but at some point I feel these smaller tactical nuclear systems are going to be used. Now, what they've said is they will use them if they feel that Belarus's independence or sovereignty is threatened. Well, what do we mean by threatened? That has such a wide, a wide scope for interpretation. So I can go and I can threaten Vladimir Putin now. I wouldn't, because he's a pretty scary guy. But I could threaten Vladimir Putin now. Is he going to take me seriously? No, but I've threatened him. You see where I'm going? What is that? What's that river that the Belarusians are going to say, right, these guys are threatening me? Because don't forget, right now as we speak, the Ukrainians are pushing more troops into the Belarusian border. So could they call that? Could they say, hey guys, look, we're going to use these now because the Ukrainians are massing an army on our border. We feel threatened. So it's a very good word to use, and it kind of murkies things because they've used that word threatened. So let me just read here, guys, from the... Right, guys, so this is from the Belarusian Chief of the General Staff. One of the final arguments and points that act as a deterrent is the return of non-strategic nuclear weapons to our country. We have been trained on how to handle these weapons. We can use them with confidence. We are capable of doing it, and we have no doubt we will use them if the sovereignty and independence of our country are threatened. He also accused Poland of inciting a situation on the Belarusian-Polish border through which illegal migrants enter Poland from Belarus. So you see a few things happening here, guys, all right? You see the rhetoric ratcheted up now. You see Belarus looking like they're going to move into this conflict at some point. You also see, again, we're seeing this all over the world at the moment. We're seeing it in Russia, we're seeing it in Belarus. Some people argue we're seeing it in the UK. Certainly people are arguing they're seeing it in the United States. We're seeing this militarization of migrants. I don't know if we can call them migrants. You see, a migrant would be somebody who fills out paperwork, who applies, who is accepted, and then they come to whatever country they want. I guess that would be the definition of a migrant. Somebody that goes over a border. I don't know what they're calling it, guys. They're calling it migrants, but I think the technical use of the word is wrong, but that's what it says here. But we're seeing the weaponization of the migration, I guess. I know that's wrong. And we're also seeing again and again and again this more rhetoric, the more talk about these tactical nuclear systems. And, with the imminency, I think that's a word. If it's not, it should be, and it is now. The imminency of the F-16s about to be flown in Ukraine. I think this is going to key in, the use of these tactical systems. Why? Well, why not? Why wouldn't you use them? Because one of these systems, it would take out a whole airfield, the infrastructure, everything around it. The rest of the world would go, okay, we probably need to rethink this. Okay, we probably need to rethink this. Because it's the rhetoric and the words that these people are using that tells us what's going to happen next. Remember, guys, all right, months ago I told you guys about the Folklands, and literally months. And what's the date of this? Hang on. And this article is from the 21st of June. So like months and months and months back, I told you about the Falklands. I tell you things what are going to happen in the future, and it's the weeds that you need to keep an eye on, because if you look in the weeds and see what's happening, see these little things that are, these little things, these little flames, these little bits of dry tinder. Once you see them and you identify them, you can say, right, okay, that's going to happen. Why? And then everything else clicks into place, and then you see these things, you know, grow, and then people on the mainstream are like, oh yeah, we didn't see that over there. Yes, because you're not looking. But guys, you guys have been fantastic, thank you. And that's it, guys. I'm going to back to grid. I'll see you later.